recognize a few of you from my time at Warwick.
I'll follow Rodney. Hi everyone, I'm Amara. I'm a future at Clifford Chant and I'm currently on my GDL with Papa actually.
Yeah, hi guys. My name's Papa. Again, as Amara said, we're actually in the same GDL class at the moment. But yeah, I'm a future at CC.
Oh, is it me left? Okay, cool. So hi, I'm Kanika. I'm also a future at CC. I'm currently gap yearing before starting my LPC in 2023.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'll just go through what we're going to be experiencing today. So we're going to start off with a panel of our amazing speakers. We're going to find out more about their journeys to law, where they came from, you know, how they've grappled with their mental health during that journey, and diversity and inclusion, and of course so much more. And following that, we're going to have the chance to have a Q&A from everyone who's here today. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can either hold it till the end for the Q&A, or you can put it in the chat, or use the hand function to ask them directly yourself during the event if it's related to, you know, the topic we're kind of discussing at that moment. Just to mention, we're going to be discussing mental health in particular, which might be upsetting for some of our attendees. So I'm going to put a link in the chat that can point you to the Warwick Wellbeing Services if you need to talk to someone with about anything you're going through. And also, this meeting is being recorded, so just beware. We just want to make sure it's available for people at a later stage. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started with the panel. And so we're going to get started with journeys to law. So I'm going to ask essentially how you got into law and why law. So does anyone want to start?
I'm assuming you mean why commercial law, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't mind going for it. I think that going to Warwick commercial law is like the biggest path and the most common path that's presented to you. So I very much was a sucker for that as well. I was, drawn in by the flashy merch presentations, blah, 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 and like all that kind of stuff. But in terms of, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and pretend I wanted this forever. I was very much kind of drawn into it in my first year at the law fair. But in terms of like my own journey, I figured out that commercial law was a path that I wanted to pursue, at least now, through doing first year schemes. I did the Ashurst one, and I did Spark as well, which is how I got my trading contract at Clifford Chance. But yeah, just on that, I feel like you don't need to look at commercial law as a lifelong journey. I really kind of want to stress that point. For me personally, I don't know about the rest of the speakers, but commercial law is what I want to do right now. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years time, 10 years time, 15 years time. Like, it's not a life path that I'm kind of restricting myself to. It's something that I saw at Warwick that seemed cool and that I apparently was capable of achieving. So I kind of went for it. But it wasn't, and it still isn't, the be all and end all for me at this point.
I don't mind going next. Yeah, how much time do I have? That's the question. I'm just joking. So I didn't study at Warwick, unlike Kanika. So I was at St Andrews in Scotland for 4 years. And yeah, it's definitely not like Warwick in the sense that commercial law is not, it's not popular. Let's just it's not on the forefront of a lot of people's minds when it comes to careers. But I knew I wanted to become a lawyer. Yeah, I knew that before I started my degree. I actually planned to do a law degree, but my parents were pushing me to do philosophy because they knew I was doing well at that in school. It's what I enjoyed. And then obviously I found out about the GDL, so I just thought, okay, right, I'm going to study philosophy. I'm going to do what I enjoy, and I can worry about the law later. And yeah, now doing the GDL, I'm very glad I did that. But yeah, my sort of journey through to Clifford Chance, I did a Spark scheme. I did it in my second year. I was on a 4-year course. And yeah, I loved it. It was really good. You know, like obviously the firm will splash the cash, will, you know, make you fall in love with the firm. And then I had my training contract interview directly after the scheme, so about a week or two afterwards. And yeah, it was nothing short of a car crash. Like, it was really bad. It was so bad. I think for a number of reasons. I think I kind of, you know, once I'd actually got the internship, I thought, okay, right, I've made it. Like, I don't really have to worry that much, you know, just go through it and I'll get the TC. And actually, that's kind of what happens to a lot of people in Spark. I think there was a number of factors as well. I was working night shifts at the time, so I literally took a day off. I basically walked in sleeping. And yeah, I didn't disclose my disabilities at the time, which also didn't help as well. Basically, I went really unprepared. So obviously came out, I knew definitely there was no way I'd got the training contract, had my rejection. And yeah, that was a really difficult time for me, because you've kind of been at the firm for a couple of weeks or a week. You've gotten to know everyone really well. Like, the firm have sold themselves to you. And then they turned around and be like, yeah, sorry, we're not offering you a training contract. So yeah, it was hard. It was very difficult. I can't lie. It was, yeah, it was quite a dark time, I think, knowing how hard I really wanted to, especially for Clifford Chance as well, knowing how much I wanted to spend at the firm, and to get so close and yet, you know, sort of get that rejection was quite hard. So the subsequent years, I applied to other firms, and again, it was just the same thing of either silly mistakes at interviews that would sort of cost me. I think one interview I remember in particular was for a vac scheme at Freshfields, and I think the reason why that always sticks with me is, I missed my flight actually, going to that interview. Got there on time, however, and yeah, I would say I walked out of there thinking that if I don't get this, then commercial law just isn't for me. So much so to the point that I remember leaving one of the interviews and the partner said, I can't wait to see you at the firm. You know, what type of person says, I can't wait to see you at the firm, and then you don't get the offer? You know where this is going. I didn't get the offer, and I did get my feedback to a month later. And in the meantime, I had interviews at other firms as well. So by the time Freshfields had said no, like, my mind had shut down. I was like, right, that's it. Like, I forget commercial law. Like, I don't even want anything to do with it anymore. But I didn't get my feedback until I had interviews at other firms from Freshfields, just knowing that I failed the written test. You know, so these types of things happen. And I was in my final year at St Andrews, and I actually, the day of the deadline for a training contract at CC, I reapplied. I called in sick at work and just reapplied. And I left it to the day of the deadline because, you know, I'd really at that point really thought, okay, there's no way. But yeah, just on a one-off, just put the application through, and yeah, it ended up with the TC. So yeah, definitely a roller coaster ride of emotions. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much, Papa, for sharing. For me personally, I was exposed to the legal field before university, and it was actually around sixth form, where I was entering sixth form. I was like, I'm going to do medicine, and then I remembered I can't maths to save my life. So that was shut down very quickly. Then I was like looking at different careers that I could do, and I thought, because throughout my entire life, everyone has always said you strike me as a lawyer. So whenever I said I was going to do medicine, it just didn't make sense to anyone. So I said, let me give the legal field a chance. And I was very fortunate to know a few lawyers in the family, but also to have a sixth form which was able to just cater for that, because the principal of the sixth form was an ex-commercial solicitor at, I think, Salter and May, actually, and before he became a principal. So he allowed a lot of us a lot of opportunities and exposure. And I walked into different law fairs and different law days and different things, and I was like, this is for me. This is where my personality and my skill sets, confident. I can't speak today, sorry. For context, I've literally just finished another event with Clifford Chance. I'm all talked out, so do bear with me because my brain is very ready to shut down. So I was like, this is where I am comfortable in, and this is something that I can do. And so I pursued that sort of journey throughout my entire life. So I came to university and I said, I'm going to do sociology and law, realized I do not enjoy studying law. I just like the idea of practicing it, and the speed in which that law degree was dropped was hilarious. I've never dropped something so quickly in my entire life. If there was a record, I've probably broken it. So that was just so much fun. So I dropped out of that just in sociology, loved every second of it, but always kept my eye on the ball and the idea that I definitely do want to practice law and I do want to go into the legal field. And as Kanika has said, at Warwick, you are shown commercial law. It is flashed at you, and firms are very impressive. But I doing a lot of student activism as well. I was like to myself, okay, my skill sets are definitely commercial law, but my heart is definitely not there. And so I tried to find an in between, find a firm that was well invested in pro bono work, who had great connections with several charities and would allow me the opportunity to do both, and could even sponsor the student activism that I was doing. And I found it at Clifford Chance and another firm as well. So I was debating between the two, and at the very end, Clifford Chance was the one I went for, simply because just the vibe of that firm is second to none. This is like free promo, but it's second to none, and so that's what swayed me over to them. But it could have gone either way. I don't know, but that was essentially my journey to law. It was definitely straightforward, but a few bumps along the road. But yeah, I kind of knew I was going to do it. But like Kinika has said, it's not forever. It's not forever, but it's definitely the right decision for now.
I don't mind going next. Oh, sorry. We go.
Go ahead.
Me? You?
You can go ahead.
Thank you. So hi everyone. So in terms of my journey to law, it's pretty long, but I think I should probably consolidate it down to kind of the key parts, echoing very much what's already been said. But I went to Birmingham, not Warwick, sorry. But in terms of the kind of careers advice, and the legal opportunities at Birmingham, they're very much quite similar to Warwick. So once I joined Birmingham, kind of the path that's there for most law students is either commercial law or to go down the barrister route. So I joined university knowing I wanted to become a lawyer, but I really didn't know what type of lawyer I wanted to be. But what I did was kind of just hone in on everything that was thrown at me, and just try and really delve into what was there. So I took the opportunity to attend as many open days as I could, use all the work experience opportunities that were there for myself as well. So in my first year, I actually did quite a lot of work experience that was outside of commercial law. So I did a lot of family, employment, real estate, property work. And if anything, I think that's probably quite good advice for people that don't really know what area they want to go into, because it really enabled me anyway, to first learn that there is law apart from criminal law, which is kind of all I thought that was there joining university, and kind of what you see on TV as well. But then also kind of figure out what is and isn't for you and what you do enjoy. But I mean, one thing I did find really hard was to actually find corporate or commercial work experience. And that's where your VAC schemes do come in. So I then took that into my second and my third year, where I tried to kind of steer away from those areas of law by choosing my module. So going to third year, I chose company law, contract law, kind of the more kind of commercial corporate fields that I knew the city law firms would kind of maybe not prefer, but might look better on your application to kind of just show that you do actually have an interest in that area. Did those modules, really enjoyed them. And then alongside that, I made sure to get involved in quite a lot of social mobility organisations. So one thing that I was quite active in at university was being a part of Aspiring Solicitors, which a lot of you might be aware of, and was actually my route into my current firm. So I'm from Birmingham, and my intention was actually to stay in Birmingham, and I didn't actually think to be quite frank, that would be good enough to join a city law firm, just because I don't know, but when you're from a region, and you don't have any lawyers in your family or any
have any kind of connections in your family, you just think, for me anyway, city law is probably not for me, probably not something that's accessible or that I'd be good enough for, quite essentially. But I went on an open day with aspiring solicitors, and they are very much there to increase diversity in the profession and also just to open pathways for students and candidates that are looking into that type of law but don't have much background into it. And I attended an open day at my current firm, absolutely loved it, loved the people, and really could see myself there. And I could generally see myself practicing at the firm, which again sounds very cliche and just a bit airy-fairy, but it's so key to just be able to actually imagine yourself being there one day, especially if you're going into it feeling so out of place and new. I then ended up completing the VAC scheme my third year at my firm, and then interviewed for the TC, which is how I'm currently where I am now. But yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded way to just say that I very much came into law having no background at all, no connections, but knowing that I wanted to become a lawyer, and then finding kind of an avenue in a place where I thought I'd have an interest. And there's something I definitely recommend to all of you attending today. And I really hope today will kind of open up any questions that you have as well about corporate or commercial law or any routes into profession.
Thank you so much. Rodney, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think I kind of knew I wanted to go into law from a young age, having done quite a bit of work experience. I wasn't quite sure what type of law. Like, I considered being a judge and going down the route of eventually becoming a judge, and also considered the barrister route, but I quickly found out that really wasn't for me. I attended a trial which lasted, I think, 4 or 5 hours, and I was falling asleep after 1 hour, so I kind of knew this wasn't really the career path for me. And this sounds slightly strange, but the entire reason that I'm a trainee solicitor right now, ultimately, is because of Donald Trump. I was actually meant to go to university in America, which for most of my life, that was sort of the plan. And I applied to various universities and sort of got in, and just assumed that I'd eventually become a lawyer there. And this, when I was applying, it was 2015, I think. And I would have started in America in 2017. Trump won the election, I forget when, like 2016 or whatever. And I kind of reconsidered going to the US for various reasons, including the fact that he's sort of making it harder for, also, you might have guessed I'm not from the UK, but he made it harder for international students to come to the country. So I ended up going to the UK, which really wasn't the main plan for me. And I think it sort of ultimately worked out really well for me. But I didn't sort of purposely think that I'd end up at Slaughter and May when I was in high school, or even when I was at university, to be honest. I sort of just saw where things took me. And even at university, I didn't really know if I'd really want to become a solicitor. I wasn't actually sold on the idea of becoming a solicitor until I did 2 vacation schemes. I think if you are going to sort of go down this career path, I would recommend you could definitely do the direct TC route, but I think it's best to sort of get experience in a law firm and see if it's the sort of thing that you like to do long term. And also, I think when you're applying, like, all the firms sort of brand themselves similarly or market themselves similarly, but when you're actually in the building with people from the firm, I think you can get a real sense if you can work there long term and sort of if these are the sort of people you want to work with. So I think it was the vacation schemes that sold me on the profession and sold me on the sort of firms that I was interested in. And after I got a training contract offer in 2019, I accepted and finished my degree, did the LPC, and ended up here. And also, like Papa, I thought my interview went really terrible, but he had the benefit of, I think you did yours after your scheme. I did my interview during my scheme. So after my interview, I had to go back to my desk, having thought it went terrible and feeling terrible, and continue working for another week with the firm. So I just assumed everything had gone terrible. And after my 3 weeks was up, I was going to get kicked out and never hear from the firm again. But it worked out, I guess. They gave me the job, and here I am 7 months into it. So that's how I sort of ended up here. And I guess I have to thank Donald Trump for winning the election for me ending up here.
And yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm Anthony. I actually studied law at UCL, but kind of prior to that, the reason why I kind of chose law, kind of the A-levels I was doing was like maths, French, and history, and I feel like I didn't really see myself continuing with those going into uni, just like because on the maths side, I feel like I ran out of talent to go past A-level, and then French and history, I just didn't really like fancy like going in super in depth. So I was like, let me try something new. Law, like, because I thought it would be academically challenging one, and just interesting to know more about like what kind of governs the world around us and stuff like that. But yeah, at UCL, kind of similar to what people have said at Warwick, it's like super commercial and everyone's very switched on. So just purely on the basis of what people around me were doing, I quickly figured out that application season starts pretty much like within a month of you getting to uni. And that's even in first year as well. So yeah, I had to kind of work out where I wanted to apply to and what sort of firms I was trying to target, because I was kind of, as other people said, kind of sold by the kind of corporate commercial law lifestyle, just job, and just working in that industry I thought would be kind of suited to my abilities. And yeah, so I kind of, in first year, I did the WOW first year fast track scheme, which is, I guess, similar to other firms' springboard schemes or whatever. But you don't get a direct TC off the back of it. It kind of puts you, basically, you get a place on the back scheme for second year. So in second year, I did, again, a scheme at WOW and then also at Kirkland and Slaughters. And yeah, I think you can, vacation schemes are definitely probably the best way to suss out a firm. Like from when I got into WOW in first year, I kind of already had a good feeling about the place, about the people there. I could see myself working there, as other people have said. And yeah, so that's kind of why I chose it in the end. And also in terms of the like type of firms I'd apply to, I chose kind of mostly US firms purely because on a personal basis, I thought it seemed a bit more dynamic and just like generally they tend to take fewer trainees, not all US firms, but I kind of wanted to be somewhere where you kind of get a bit of responsibility from the outset and you have that chance to like work with kind of fairly senior people, and then you can shine or see if it's for you on the back of that. So yeah, that's how I kind of ended up here at WOW, and I'm in my first seat now in restructuring, and I've been here for like just over a month now, a month and a half. Yes, it's gone pretty quickly. But yeah, happy to talk more about that later.
Thank you so much, everyone, for telling us just kind of like a snippet of your personal journey to law. I just wanted to make one disclaimer, by the way. Our chat function isn't working, but we still want everyone to ask any questions throughout if you feel comfortable. So please do just unmute yourself, and hopefully the raise your hand symbol thing's up there. But feel free to do that, or you can send a message via the welfare page or Base Law Warwick, and we can ask it for you. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Debbie, who's gonna bring us to the next section of the panel.
Yeah, so we're just now going to talk about resilience. That's like our key word right now for this section. So resilience to me is like being able to keep going in the face of adversity. It's also knowing when to stop and quit, and it's also knowing how to persevere. I feel like we've already mentioned a little bit about this through Papa, who mentioned about your TC interviews and like the rejections you face. I guess the question I have to you, and of course to all our speakers, is law and rejection is one thing. So how have you faced rejection, and how have you kept going? How have you kept writing another application? And how do you keep staying motivated in like this law journey that we're all on right now? So Papa, if you'd like to go first, and then please jump in.
Do you know what? Having listened to sort of everyone's sort of university experiences, and I'm sure a lot of you guys here are studying at Warwick, one of the big things I would always caution against in terms of trying to build resilience is having a herd mentality. Oh, I'm going to do commercial law because everyone else is doing it. And I think the road that I'm trying to go down with this is that it really comes down to your motivations as to why you're pursuing commercial law in the first place. If you're doing it because it looks like a glamorous job and it pays a lot, you know, when rejection hits you in the face, you're not really going to have the motivation and the resilience to keep going. So yeah, question your motives. And I think for me, it wasn't until, you know, I had been rejected as many times as I had, that I really had to sit down and actually question, like, is this something I really want to do? Like, is this something that I'm actually capable of doing? Whereas before, you know, you walk into the interview and they ask you why commercial law, and it's so easy to rehearse an answer, it's so easy to think of an answer that just sounds good. But, you know, you really need to sit down and question your motivations as to, you know, why am I actually doing this? And, you know, if you do go with the right motivations, actually, it's kind of natural to build up that resilience, especially in the face of rejection. For me, and I think I've mentioned this before, kind of the two, I'm a philosophy student, so it makes sense that I'll say this, but kind of the two sort of guiding principles in everything that I've done in life has been either excellence or enjoyment. So, you know, I always ask myself the question, you know, even when I was picking my A-levels, is this something I'm going to enjoy? Is this something I'm going to excel at? If it is, I'm going to do it. If it isn't, then I'm going to pass, you know. And I think it was, yeah, particularly after I got the rejection from Freshfields, actually, where I thought, right, if I can't do any better than this, then, you know, what's the point? That I really had to sit down and question, okay, why am I actually going down this route? And obviously the conclusion I came down to is that I know that this is a route that I'm going to enjoy, and I know this is a route where I strongly believe I'm going to excel in. And I think that gave me the natural resilience to actually keep going. Don't get me wrong, like, it's not perfection. Again, like, I strongly believe that, like, there's no way it's going to happen. Again, I left my application for CC till the day of the deadline. I knew it was there, but I thought to myself, there's no way, like, there's just no way it's going to happen. Some of you, you know, listening might be fortunate enough to just apply once to a firm and, you know, get a TC, you know, well done if that's the case, you know, but for those of you guys who don't, really sit down and question your motives, you know, look at your other options as well. Like, you know, again, going back to that herd mentality, commercial law isn't the be all and end all. Just because everyone is going down that path does not mean you have to go down that path. There's so many other routes that you can explore. So yeah, I think the way of building up resilience is first to question your motives and to make sure you're not following a herd mentality. And it just comes naturally, to be honest. And I feel you reach a point where you're like, you know, regardless of what happens, I'm going to pursue this. You know, I'm going to keep trying. And that was sort of my mentality during that as well. And just one other thing as well, I know I'm going on for quite a while. When I was at St Andrews in my final year, and I was doing a lot of leadership roles as well. I had my dissertation coming up. I had a load of essays. I was doing so much applying for law firms, and like it very much became quite overwhelming. You know, so being quite disciplined with my time, and how some of the choices I made, some of the lifestyle choices I made as well, sort of had a big impact on my ability to just build that resilience to keep going as well. But I'm sure that's something we'll probably come on to later. But yeah, question your motives. That's what I would say.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I learned from that. Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to touch in on any time they faced a setback and how they overcome that? Please just unmute yourself and go.
Yeah, no, so thank you so much, Papa, because I was like literally what I wanted to say, because when you come into the legal field and you're applying to it, no one talks as much as they should about how much rejection you're going to face, because everyone always tells you the success story. You go on LinkedIn and everyone's just like, I'm so happy to announce that I've gotten this. And I'm like, when is it going to be me? So the amount of rejection you face is overwhelming, and it is shocking, and it knocks you down a peg or two. I think I remember I think this was my second year actually, because in my first year I was very comfortable and very relaxed with the fact that I had experience beforehand. So that I was very complacent basically. And so I lost my in. So I was trying to make up for it in my second year. And I was facing rejection upon rejection upon rejection upon rejection of upon rejection. It was insane. I actually started looking at different career pathways. I tried to look at banking and I said, God forbid. I was looking at other different career pathways and I said, and really what Papa has said, I was just literally to myself, right now I'm playing at my strength. This is literally what my skill sets are very comfortable in. I'm good at this. So how am I going to demonstrate that I'm good at this? And so I changed my tactic. I actually spoke to so many different people and to sort of like realign my priorities so that when I went into third year, I was hitting the ground running and I knew exactly what I wanted to do and I knew exactly what I was going to do. To an extent that I think in my final year, I only applied to 4 firms, which was very risky, but because I was like, I don't want to lie to myself. I'm going to go into this career because this is what I want to do. And if I'm going to, and this is what I want to do, these are the places I want to be at. And if I don't get them, then it's the will of God and I'm going to do something else with my time because I'm not going to compromise on like my beliefs and things like that. And so that was very risky. Don't tell anyone I was doing that. I literally applied to 4 places. So God had his ways and thank God for that, because if not, would have had a very fun time trying to explain that to my family. But I think not taking things personally when you face rejection is so important, and not saying this is a reflection on me and my abilities and my skills, but just saying this is a reflection of how I've just done this particular application, and so what can I learn from that? And if you face a rejection, never be afraid to respond back to the employers and just say, how can I improve? What did I do wrong? Where can I do better? And speaking to other people who have been successful and saying, what did you do? And reaching out to people is so important, because knowledge is power. And just like, you have a wealth of knowledge around you, especially at university, where you have people older than you or alumni as well who have applied to the firms you want to. So don't take rejection personally, just persevere if this is what you want to do. But if it's not, find a new career.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. But one thing I wanted to add, like 100%, like what Amara and Papa were saying, I agree wholeheartedly. But then also, like in terms of motivations, like in a more practical way, look at how you're applying to things. Like, be realistic with yourself. Like, something that I see when I mentor actively every single year, and I'll always have mentees come to me and be like, "Why am I getting rejected again and again and again?" And I'm like, let me read your applications. And they will just, like, the quality isn't there because they're applying to 50 firms, you know, without putting heart into it, without putting research into it, without putting, you know, the time and dedication that requires to do an application. You know, obviously, like, Papa, is great that you did it in one day, but that's because you had your previous CC experience as well to help you with it. You cannot write an application in one day, like from scratch. They do take an average 3 to 4 weeks to write. So be realistic with yourself. Like, why are you getting rejected? Look at your feedback, like Papa said. Like, what is it? What is it that's making you like be rejected from time and time again? If you really believe that you have the skill set, why isn't that being reflected? You know, there is a reason for your rejection every single time. Yes, don't take it personally, of course, but just like understand that it's better for you to put in the time, the research, tailor applications. You know, Amara said she only applied to 4 and that was risky, but I actually recommend to maximum apply to 5. In any given cycle, I will always tell my mentees never, ever, ever apply to more than 5 firms, because there's no way you can give each application the time that it needs alongside keeping up your grades, your social life, your mental health, all that stuff. There's no way you can do it. So obviously, like, I agree with everything that's been said, but on a realistic note as well, like, look at what you've been producing. Is it actually what will be successful? Reach out to your peers. You know, Warwick and most universities have a pretty strong alumni network, and Warwick is one of the most strongest ones I've ever seen, where we're so willing to come back and help with everything. Reach out, have a look at their applications, ask them for advice, and compare it. And again, be harsh with yourself, be realistic. Are you producing what you need to be producing at that level to gain those kinds of jobs? And if you're not, then you'll notice that once you make that change, you might see more success. And it's important for yourself to notice that you're not being rejected because you're bad. You're being rejected because your technique wasn't good in that moment. And that is really easily fixable. Like, it's so easily fixable, and it can save so much heartbreak if you can just like change the way that you approach applications, and tailor them and all that kind of stuff as well.
Do you want to
Right.
jump in, Papa?
You're on mute.
Yeah. No, just very quickly because I know you guys want to say some stuff as well. But after hearing what was said, I think the thing that really comes to mind for me is that the topic of resilience is quite big, but I feel like if you don't think about learning from failure beforehand, you're not going to get anywhere, regardless of how much resilience you have. It's almost like trying to drive a car with the parking brake on, like you're not going to get very far. And I think that's where the penny dropped for me, was actually being able to learn from my previous mistakes, being able to learn where I got things wrong. For me personally, it was being able to learn how my disabilities affect me in an interview scenario. Once I got that, it flowed. But if you're someone who's trying to build up the resilience, but you don't have the capability to reflect on your previous mistakes and see where you went wrong and why and learn from it, forget it. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And then again, on what Kanika was saying as well, in building resilience, it's very hard to be resilient and motivated to apply for firms you don't want to work at. For me personally, the way I kind of felt the firms I wanted to work at was actually being able to visit them. I interviewed at a firm that I didn't want to work at. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't really prepare because I didn't want to work there. Like, I didn't have the motivation. So I thought you get that extra step of motivational resilience to be able to really work for a firm, put your application for a firm that you actually want to work for. If you're just what I call just doing a spray bullet approach of just applying to anywhere and everywhere, oftentimes when I hear people say I applied to 50 firms, I didn't get anywhere, I'm kind of like, I don't really feel sorry for you. Like, you really need to target your approach as to where you're applying to firms, and firms that you actually want to work at. Yeah, I just wanted to drop that in.
Just to add to that, the answer that I give if people ask me how I built my resilience is actually through my failures and through my downfalls. So if anything, the way that I become stronger and become more motivated and more driven is by my downfalls, or what I think were my failures, or what I did wrong. So I think once you kind of get knocked down, you realize how much you want something. So in my second year, if I submitted quite a few applications and got quite a few rejections, and I could have just turned around and be like, that's it, I don't want to do that anymore, and just leave it there. And then that would have completely told me that this wasn't for me. But instead, I got back up again and I applied again. And one quote that I've always kind of lived by, and someone told me when I was at university, is that every rejection is a redirection, or look at every rejection as a redirection. So redirection in terms of firm, redirection in terms of your mindset, or redirection in terms of what you want to do in general. So for instance, I was rejected for quite a few firms in my second year, but that redirected me to my current firm, which I didn't even think about, but which kind of cropped up. And if it wasn't for my rejections in my second year, I wouldn't really be where I am now. So generally, what I would say is, don't be too hard on yourself failures, because like everyone has said on this panel, it is so normal. And also, don't see a failure as a failure, just see it as extra drive and motivation to kind of get you there. And sometimes maybe you're just not ready. Maybe you just, like everyone said on the panel, you just aren't at that stage yet. Because you might be a very good individual in terms of your potential, but maybe you need to work on that potential. Maybe there's certain skills that you need to develop, or maybe you might be an amazing candidate, but you just aren't that good at writing your application, because you might be very good in person, but the way that you convey that on an application is a whole different art. So there's so many different avenues, and sometimes it's just about nitpicking it, and it can seem horrible and not very nice, but that will also just add to your character building and becoming a stronger candidate in the long term. So, and to be quite honest, when you go for interviews, that's also character building, because sometimes you get scrutinized, sometimes they're not very nice, and you come out of there with, sometimes not very nice comments, but again, you kind of have to just take all of that in and again, go again, because if that's what you really want and that's your kind of end goal, then you have to just keep at it, and that's when you know that you really want it. So
I think, to add on to that, I think self-awareness is quite important in terms of knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. But I'd also say, I think one thing I really benefited from is I sort of took a logical approach to sort of careers things. So I set goals for myself in second year. Like, I wrote it down in like a Word document, what I wanted to achieve. And then I sort of I did a sort of plan on how I would go about achieving those goals. And part of that was also I didn't apply to many firms, but also other things like sort of reaching out to people on campus who'd been successful with those firms. And that's something I'd really recommend, because I think I benefited quite a bit from mentorship from people who were older than me. And I would say definitely try and build up your network and sort of try and surround yourself with people who are equally as ambitious as you, or people who are more accomplished than you, because I think you benefit so much from that. And I've been lucky from high school to university. I've been surrounded by friends who are equally as ambitious and who knew a lot more about sort of career stuff than I did, and I was able to benefit from their knowledge. So I think things like that are ways you can sort of prepare or sort of set yourself up to succeed. But I think also perspective is pretty important, because I feel like when I was in second year, I thought the goal was to get a training contract and then that's it. But it's interesting because once you achieve that, the goalpost moves. Then you have to like pass your degree, then the LPC. And then now that I've started as a trainee solicitor, the goalpost has moved. Now I'm thinking about becoming an associate and what I do after that, and more generally about life. So I think it's important to have perspective. Like getting a training contract is not the be all and end all. And you don't have to get a training contract at university. I think the majority of people get a training contract after university. And the average age where people get a training contract, I think the average age is like 28. So it's not a race, it's a marathon, to be corny. And I think I'd really stress that don't do commercial law because you think it pays well or because other people are doing it. It's something you really, I think, have to be motivated to do, because like there's benefits to like the pay and sort of other benefits, like you get to travel and stuff like that. But it is a genuinely difficult job where I think you need to have motivation to do it, and you need to know it's something you want to do. And also, as a trainee, you're sort of stuck in the job for 2 years minimum. So you want to be in that sort of 2-year sentence, to put it that way. But you want to be somewhere where you're gonna enjoy working there. If it's like you have to work till 10, 11, 12, 1 a.m., it's gonna be somewhere where you can sort of get that's not normal, Debbie. I'm just saying as an example. You want to be somewhere where like you're with people who will support you, where you can thrive and be your best self. So I think a lot of introspection is good in this career path, and don't worry about sort of getting a TC in first year, second year, third year. If it's something you want to do, it'll happen at some point if you commit yourself to it.
I think Precious has something to say. Go for it.
Yeah, Mara, sorry, it's my preferred name. But yeah, no, I really wanted to highlight what Rodney had just said. The whole goal setting is so important, and that's something I did throughout my entire year, my entire 3 years of university, and still do to this day. And I cannot stress how important it is to have clear goals and clear visions, but also what Rodney said, how to attain those goals in your diary or physically in front of you as well, or in mood boards if you're more creative of an individual and you want something as an outlet. It's so important because it helps you stay on track, because sometimes you can get knocked off the journey. So just to remind yourself, this is what I've set myself and this is what I want to do is so important. And also when Rodney said, it's just like a big shout out to Rodney as well, but when he said about having a good network, it's so important. I remember during my time always running to Rodney. I don't mean to like send everyone to Rodney, but like always running to Rodney or sending people to Rodney as well. Just be like, if you ever have a question, just go to him. He's great. And so having people that you can lean on and who can support you and who can give you advice or just tell you that's a terrible idea is so important. And yeah, just can't stress that enough.
Papa, please feel free, go.
Yeah, this might sound counter to what has already been said. There's a lot of benefits to networking, but I also have a number of problems with the platforms that people do use to network. One in particular, which you all do know. I think when it comes to building resilience and sort of trying to stay encouraged in the midst of rejection. One of the things I did is that I actually deleted LinkedIn, and only downloaded it where necessary or when I needed to contact someone. I hate LinkedIn. Let me just put it that way. Like it's a showboating platform. That's what it is. And you know, if you're in the midst of rejection, I don't think it's particularly helpful to just go scrolling through a feed of people explaining how I've secured the training. That's actually why I didn't announce when I got my TC that, you know, I didn't put an announcement on LinkedIn. Like, I feel this is for me personally. Maybe it might not apply to some of you, but being able to keep my head down, focus on my path and my journey and where I am right now, was what got me through. I think that's also what kept me resilient. It was just, yeah, you just get on it and you just see, oh, I'm proud to announce I've got a TC here. Like, how is that going to help me? Like, it just really isn't. And so that's kind of the approach I took. Like, I just kind of blocked my mind from all of that. And of course, I had all my network and like my support in place, and I leveraged a lot of social mobility stuff to sort of help me through the process. But yeah, just don't be fixated on other people's success and focus on where you are right now. I know how cliche that sounds, but it's kind of what got me through.
No, thank you so much for that, because I can definitely relate. Rodney, you have your hand up, please. Give us your wisdom.
I just wanted to second that and just say, I was going to say some things about LinkedIn, but this is being recorded. I just want to say LinkedIn is completely useless. No one has ever, I don't think anyone's ever gotten a TC, a job from LinkedIn. It's no help at all. I think I stopped looking at LinkedIn a while ago because I think it is pretty toxic. There's a lot of, I'm the best, look at what I've accomplished, but like, it's always stuff like, I am 21, I bought 3 houses, I have 10 jobs, I don't sleep, I have no social, like stuff like that, where like, I think it's pretty bad for people to see. And I think I noticed during lockdown, like during the lockdown period, it was especially toxic, where people are like, oh yes, we're locked down, but I still managed to accomplish this, this, and this. And when I mentioned networking before, I was not at all thinking about LinkedIn. For me, I literally would just meet people on campus, and like, I think back then it was a Costa. I'd just be like, do you want to get a coffee in the Costa on campus and just talk for 30 minutes and just reach out to people? I mean, there's plenty of people on campus who are successful, and just reach out to them through Facebook or things. Like, even I met a lot of people through LawSoc. So in terms of when I say like networking, you don't need LinkedIn, and I wouldn't really recommend even getting LinkedIn, to be honest. I don't think it helped me at any point in my journey. Yeah, I think it can be useful when you sort of get to the level of like, you're actually in a job. Like, I've had recruiters send me messages, but they're for jobs that like are completely like unrelated to my skills or like whatever. But yeah, LinkedIn is not the one.
Thank you. I agree. I mean, not that it matters, but I do agree. Anthony, do you have anything to add to us on like the topic of resilience, maybe? We'd really love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think to add some my final thoughts to this topic, and conscious not to like tread over the ground that people have already talked about. I think as humans, naturally, we kind of tend to focus on the negative outcomes quite a lot. And it's easy to do, but especially in like an application scenario, you think, oh, I didn't get through the video interview here, or I didn't even get past the application stage here, or I messed up the interview stage here. But actually, I mean, as people have said, there are people out there that do the kind of scattergun approach of just applying to 10, 20 firms, and it's easy to forget. I mean, I don't really remember the statistics. I remember reading it at some point in first year when I was considering applying to commercial law, and it's like, oh, 1,000 people apply. Say a CC, 1,000 people apply to CC, and it's like 50 places, and it's like, well, what's really the point? So actually, I think if you focus on the positive outcomes of each stage of your application, I mean, now in commercial law, in a lot of firms, they have like 4 or 5 different stages before you even get to the back scheme, let alone get a TC. So kind of celebrating each one of those will make you, I think, a stronger person, and you won't feel weighed down in the sense that each news you get related to applications is negative, because you've got this whole bank of positive feedback and positive outcomes to use kind of as motivation. And I think following on from that, the things that might not go to plan, or say you have an interview and you don't really get the role after that, you can use to kind of like hyper focus in and build resilience, get moving forward. So I think, speaking about interviews in particular, it can be quite daunting, I think. And when you go in, that you're under the lights, it's like sometimes you're outnumbered. You're like, some interviews you might be fighting for your life, trying to answer the questions. It's super complicated. And then others, it's a bit of a chat, but it can be hard. I think sometimes I found myself coming out of interviews and like, or say I was speaking to a friend or family about it, I couldn't really remember what we actually talked about. So I think one tip I'd give in relation to that is to try and, when you've had a couple hours past into interview, try and write down what was discussed briefly, so that if you know it doesn't work out as planned, you can focus in on where you might want to improve. Because if you think about it like a month later, you'll be like, oh, that interview went wrong, not really too sure how or why. But kind of if you've got that written down afterwards, you can really focus in on like, oh, I think this is where I kind of like lost them, or I could have answered this question better. And when you focus in on those little things to improve, I think you'll feel more resilient, because oh, if I can nail this for next time, then I'm in with a good chance. So that's kind of all I wanted to say on that point.
I would just briefly add to that. I think it kind of helps to sort of think about how many people actually apply. So I've seen the statistics for some firms where they might get like 6,000 or 7,000 applications for a vacation scheme with 20 spots. A lot of firms use like sort of algorithms to like automatically reject certain people. So I think you sometimes have to think of rejection, like if you get rejected, I think it's sometimes helpful to think there's a chance that nobody even looked at your application, which makes it seem bad. But sometimes you get rejected and it has nothing to do with you. Like, for example, the firm might have gotten 2,000 applications and they're just like, we're just not going to look at it anymore. And you were 2001 in terms of like the amount of applications. So I think it is very important to think the rejection doesn't really reflect anything about you. It just happened, and you can just, I guess you just have to sort of keep going and hope that the next time round luck favors you. And I think that was basically what I meant to say. Like I think I found reassurance with that after like looking at the statistics and seeing this is a competitive industry. It's not easy. Even if I get rejected, it's not necessarily something to do with me. There's a lot of factors beyond my control.
Wow, I feel like I definitely have learned so much, and I feel like I'm leaving this a refined woman, which is so great. Thank you so much, everyone. Unless we have no more contributions from our speakers on this topic, I'm gonna throw it over to Etta for our next session.
We'll move on. If you have a question, just put your hand up. So the next question would be about mental health. So obviously, as you guys have said, like law is very intense, very competitive. And we kind of just wanted to know if you guys had any tips or advice for how you kind of maintain good mental health. Because obviously, even in the job, it's going to be tough, but also pursuing it. And like you said, with rejection, it's very hard sometimes to kind of bring yourself back up and feel good about yourself. So we'd love to hear how you guys have kind of dealt with that.
Can I go first? I think for me, one of the things that I did was that I made sure that I didn't make it my life. Going back to what I said about only applying to 4 or 5 firms, the main reason is obviously tailor applications, but the secondary reason is that you have time to do other things in your life. Kind of like what Amara said about for her, pro bono was really important at firms and stuff. I'm also a student activist, and it was important for me that my life was not about commercial law. because that's not where my heart, my mind, or my experiences lie. So for me, part of actually protecting my mental health was not making my degree about commercial law. So that sounds really weird, but my entire degree, if you read my transcripts, it's literally just critical race theory. So I did it about something that I actually really, really enjoyed studying and learning. Like, I didn't want to study every single day, like company law and commercial law and like business. And that wasn't what I wanted to do, because I knew that I had to do that for my applications. And ultimately, law firms don't care if you do that in your degree or not, because they teach you all of that in your LPC anyway. So an important thing that I did was like creating separation in my life and not making it my entire world. So it might sound really strange, but I found a lot of comfort in my degree because that was what I really enjoyed doing. Like, I was reading things that I really wanted to read. I was writing papers that I really wanted to write. So it was like, that was kind of where I found a lot of comfort away from the pressure of applications, which is a completely foreign world to most people, because I also have no lawyers in my family. I have no legal connections. So it's like, a first generation lawyer. Like, it was a very, very different, crazy, overwhelming world for me. So it was really important to draw those boundaries. And I guess, that in itself, creating boundaries, whether that means you're only going to like do applications for 3 hours a week. I had friends who made it a part-time job. So like they just did it for like X number of hours a week. Or that after like 9 p.m. you will not look at your cover letter, you're going to go out with your friends. So drawing and maintaining boundaries, something that generally in life is what helps with preserving your mental health, and respecting your own boundaries and your time as much as you respect other people's. I think that that's something that's very easy for me to say and easy for you to listen to, but very difficult for you to actually implement into your own life, because it's so easy to be sitting in bed at 11 p.m. like, oh, I'll just reread that cover letter that I wrote yesterday. Oh, let me just look at the application deadline one more time, because it's so easy to do it now with the internet. Like, you have one tab is Instagram, one tab is Clifford Chance, so it's so easy to do that I think that something that's so, so important to develop, like from first year, to protect your mental health for all aspects, but especially application season, is to really kind of draw boundaries as soon as you possibly can, enforce them, and be around people who also respect boundaries, like their own and yours. Don't be around people who like make you feel bad for not working. Like, don't be around people who are at midnight, and there are people like this, because I had people in my life who are like this, who are at midnight texting like, oh, can you quickly read this for me? It's like, no, I'm not going to do that for you. So boundaries, respecting yours, respecting others, and drawing them as quickly as you possibly can is the best way that I found to help protect my mental health.
Thank you so much. Like, that's reassuring for me, because I pick modules that I'm just passionate about. Like, I haven't really thought about the future. But does anyone else want to add on to that?
I think
I would.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like we're always clashing.
Yeah.
I would completely echo what Kanika said about segregation and just having a really healthy kind of discipline between your work and your personal life. But inevitably, that is really hard to kind of get right. And I still struggle with that now, to be honest. And I think people will. But I think something else that, as a trainee now, that I think really helps me on mental health is just sharing my thoughts with my peers, and definitely others that are kind of in the same position or area that I am, and sometimes just speaking, because you might have a lot on your mind that one day, but just getting it all off and speaking to someone who's also in a similar situation, they might also be going through a similar issue or problem. Sometimes honestly just speaking and sharing that just really helps clear your mind. And similarly, when I was at university and I was writing my applications and I found it really stressful and tiring and long, again, speaking to my friends who were also going through that same situation and time in their life really helped me. So I think, one, maybe just try and associate yourself and surround yourself with others that are going through that similar phase that you are, and just having that support around you that will really help you. And like Kanika said, people that maybe aren't as supportive to you, maybe just try and distance yourself, because generally like it can affect your mental health and just how you are feeling at the time. And especially if you are going through a stressful time applying for your future career, that's probably not going to be helpful. And again, that goes to putting boundaries in place, just kind of being strict with the people that are there. And sometimes it might just be being a bit tough, but it will pay off in the long term. And I think that's something that I struggle with, again, just being stronger, just talk up and kind of just stand up for myself in that sense, just be like, I don't need that right now. This is my focus, is my priorities, but these are the people that will support me with that, and just kind of having a clear line between that. And again, I know it's really easy to say all this, but it's just working on it, and the earlier you work on it, the better and easier it will get down the line.
Thank you so much. Rodney, I think you wanted to go next.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, I don't think there's any sort of easy answer. I think I've definitely gotten better in terms of like mental health and sort of like taking care of that aspect of myself. But I think it is definitely difficult and challenging, especially with everything going on in the world. It can definitely be quite overwhelming. I think you sort of need to find what works for you. I think for a lot of people that can be like sort of stress baking. I think like I found certain things that help me relax. For example, I quite enjoy runs. I feel a lot more carefree after I've gone for a run or gone to the gym. For some people, it's baking. Some people, it's cleaning. But I think you need to find something where you're just doing it. There's no sort of pressure, and it's just something that you want to do for yourself to sort of de-stress and block things out. So I think finding strategies like that, and also I really echo speaking to other people. I had quite a difficult time during the LPC, and it was quite difficult because we're doing it online, so I didn't really know how other people were finding it. I just assumed I was the only one sort of struggling and just not really engaging with it. But then we actually had a chat of like everyone in my intake was also doing it, and one person just one day said, "Am I the only one who's really been struggling?" And then everyone just sort of chimed in saying, "No, it's also me." And I don't know, I just found that really reassuring to know that I'm not the only one finding this difficult. I'm not the only one who hates the fact that we have these terrible like 6 a.m. classes over Teams and all that. So I think sort of finding other people in a similar situation, especially when you get to training level, I think is quite good, because it is quite stressful, especially for the first 6 months. And it definitely does help when you know other people in a similar situation. And if you have other people you can sort of lean on, I think that makes a big difference. But also like just try and find things that you do for yourself that are just a hobby, something you just do casually that's not deep, to use the phrase, just something that works for you. Like, literally anything. Like I've actually found that I quite enjoy vacuuming with like some music. I find that quite relaxing, like even silly things like that. So just find something where you just do it and it makes you feel better.
Thank you so much, Rodney. No, I totally agree. I think it's the little things and trying to find out what works for you and what helps you de-stress. It might not be the same for everyone else. So whether that be running, whether that be eating certain things or anything like that.
Don't become a stress eater. Speaking from experience, that's not a good outlet for stress.
Does anyone want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. I think for me, because for me personally, final year was like the hardest year for me. Just it was hell. I was doing far too much, and it was just so overwhelming. So I think one of the biggest things that I did to help my mental health was actually being kind to myself and scheduling times for me to just take a break and do nothing, because I recognized that I was overwhelmed and I was working through burnout. Like I was already burnt out. I was reaching new levels of burnout, and I was like, this is not healthy. This is unsustainable. And essentially I just can't keep going on. So I just actually taking breaks and saying I'm going to do, this day is dedicated to me doing nothing related to academic work or anything application related, or calling off sick at work, probably hated me. Just saying I'm doing absolutely nothing this day. And it really helps, because if you have a day where you've said I'm doing nothing, and you can do it in a way that you feel less guilty doing so that the next day you can return and be like, okay, I can take a few things on and just manage your time as well as you can. I think for me personally, if I don't have a, this is for me personally, if I don't have a structure, if I don't know what I'm doing for the day or for the week or even for the month, I can sort of feel very overwhelmed, and I do need a clear structure. And so timetabling things for myself, or saying today I'm going to do these things and tomorrow I'm going to do these things, and give myself some leniency that if I don't do it, it's not the end of the world. I unfortunately currently have this really, really bad habit, which I know is going to impact me when I'm a trainee, and I've been doing this my entire life. Once it hits 11, I'm not doing any other work, which is not going to be realistic for the career I'm going into, but literally my brain says, we are going to sleep, we are going to bed, we're going to watch on Netflix, and we're doing nothing else. And so allowing myself to just do that and giving myself that cut-off time and going to bed earlier if that's what I wanted, or allowing my friends to drag me out and do something like social and fun and has nothing related to the application. So, and generally just being kind to myself and realizing that you're allowed to take a day, like a break. It's not always rise and grind and doing this culture of you must work hard 24/7 to survive. Like, breathe, relax. You're a human being, and it's a bloody pandemic as well. So the world is dying. Literally take a break. So just reminding myself of these things really helped my mental health. But I'm still learning. So
thank you so much, Mara. I think it's so important to speak about things like burnout. I don't think we discuss that enough, especially like with intense degrees. It's very easy to just keep going and going. But like you said, you have to be kind to yourself and just take those breaks. I think it's enforcing boundaries as well. Like everyone has said, you have to be really strict with yourself. So yeah, does anyone else want to contribute?
Yeah. If you see me look, basically I wrote everything down that I was kind of thinking about. So if you see me sort of looking at the side, that's why. I think when it comes to mental health, one of the questions I always ask myself is, what type of relationship do I have with myself at this point in time? And what I mean by that is stress in and of itself isn't inherently bad. Pressure in and of itself isn't inherently bad, but you can have a bad relationship with stress or a bad relationship with pressure. If you don't handle pressure very well, if you're not helping, if you're not doing things to help you handle that well, oftentimes you're essentially acting in a way that's probably not going to be conducive to your mental health. And I think this is where a lot of what other people have suggested really comes into play, as to what are the types of things that help you be able to manage the stress or the pressure that you're dealing with. I think it's important to remember it's not about extinguishing pressure or trying to get rid of stress altogether. But actually, if it's going to be a part of my life basically till I die, how do I go about handling it in a way that still allows me to be productive? So just making sure you have a good relationship with pressure and stress. As Amara said, having a constant routine. For me personally, whilst I was at St Andrews, just having consistency and discipline was a key thing. I've not mastered that. Trust me, I've not. But at least I have a plan. I know what works for me. Whilst I was at uni, it was a thing of by 9 p.m. all screens off, 9:30 bed, 10 asleep. I wake up at 4:35. Because I realized that I waste a lot of time. So if I started my day earlier, I'd have more time to work. I feel that's just, I'm a morning person. Again, as was mentioned, sports. I've really got into running during the pandemic, road cycling as well, and swimming. And being able to do that in the morning, and just I can't describe the feeling of just going out on a run, or just like going out on a bike ride or whatever before starting my day, and it just makes you so clear. I know there's something probably psychological, scientific behind it, but that really helped me, especially whilst I was at university. I think someone mentioned as well, I think it might have been you, Gurpreet, about dividing your time. I like to call it almost compartmentalizing your time, having like I have to plan everything to a T. Oftentimes I realize for myself that, my stress just builds up if I haven't really sat down and thought and planned what I'm going to do. And yeah, like have a life, make time for friends, make time for family. You have to do those types of things. Like when someone sits there and tells me, oh, I was in the library for 8-9 hours today, in my mind, I'm just sitting there thinking, how much of that did you actually spend working? How much of that was actually quite productive? And for a lot of people, myself included, you can sit in the library for 8 hours and then you really get about 3 or 4 hours work done. So be realistic with yourself. Be realistic with the expectations you set. Be realistic with the goals that you set as well. For me personally, I know my faith played a really big part into staying sane whilst in my final year as well. So, you know what works for you, to be honest, and play to your strengths. I'm that type of guy who used to really struggle learning how to say no. If I'm at a house party at uni and I know like I've got a deadline coming up, being able to say, guys, like I've got to go. Don't compromise. Let me just put it that way. Don't compromise. Have your boundaries and know what works for you. If you've got a deadline coming up in, I don't know, 2 days, I know if I get home at like 4 a.m. in the morning after a party, that's my morning gone. That's my day gone, basically. So, yourself. Just don't do the things that are going to cause you to have less time. But yeah, other than that, I would say for me personally, my faith played a big part. Another thing that did as well is my university were partnered with a charity called Know You More. And they partner students with professional coaches. It's not some sort of psychological counseling or anything along those lines, but these are coaches who usually work with people in corporate fields. And essentially what they do is that they try and provide support and coaching for students as they're going through their degree. And I utilised that, and I probably would not have finished with the grades that I did or even got my TC. I was even paired with a lawyer, luckily enough, without their coaching. So that really helped me as well. But biggest thing, yourself, don't do things that are going to cause you to, have consequences down the line that's going to, make your mental health spiral. So yeah, even now, like as I'm saying this, I'm reminding myself, because you're going to fall into times where you make that mistake, you weren't supposed to do this, or I'm not going to bed on time. But yeah, don't be too hard on yourself, but at the same time, know your boundaries and know your limits.
Thank you so much, Papa. Like all of that. I totally agree. It's so true. Sometimes, as much as I want to party, sometimes I know that I'm not going to feel good the next day if I've got a deadline. So that's kind of looking after your mental health as well, making the right choices. So yeah, Anthony, would you like to add anything? Then Rodney, will come back to you.
Yeah, I think maybe from a trainee perspective, because obviously ultimately that might be where a lot of you want to go, or if and when you get there. I think everyone's made some really great points so far, and it's nice to know that we all kind of go through similar things. At uni, I remember the whole party deadline dynamic was just like a constant theme of second year. But yeah, I think you quickly find out that once you start work, especially in a commercial law firm, you're like the amount of time when you're awake that you spend either at work or attending to emails and stuff, you probably spend like maybe 70 to 80% of your day kind of doing stuff that's related to work. So you kind of have to think, like, where's the time that I have available? And like, in order to like best protect my mental health or feel like I kind of have somewhat of a handle of my life, like what do I want to be doing in that time? And yeah, I think obviously it's personal, like what you kind of choose to fill the gaps with. Papa mentioned and Rodney mentioned, like you might want to go to the gym or go for a run early in the morning. It sounds great, but it is actually pretty hard, especially as the time passes. Like in the first week of my first week since I started, I think I remember I went on a couple runs. I was feeling good. I was like, yeah, I could do this. And now, a couple months down the line, every day waking up, you're like, oh, it's another day. But yeah, if you have these little non-negotiables where you can find, you get the sense that you're kind of coping with life in general, and you get a good feeling from like keeping things going in the background. And then also for me personally, I think Amara touched on it as well, having these kind of do nothing days or times, like makes you, I think, also motivated for the times where you do need to work late or answer emails at like 9:30, because you've had that time over the weekend to rest and recharge. And then obviously trying your best to keep up with your social life is important as well, because I mean, me personally, a lot of my friends, they don't do law. They have a few that are also in commercial law. It can be quite hard to like commit to personal events basically once it starts, because you know, like evenings are very, very like work dependent. But if you can keep a little bit of time in hand, and also be honest with your supervisor. My current supervisor is very good. Like at the beginning of the week, or we have our like weekly catch ups, and she'll be like, "Oh, is there anything going on during the week and the evening that you need to get off to?" And just being honest with her in those kind of talks, and being like, "Oh, I've got this birthday dinner tomorrow, or I'm playing football on Wednesday, blah blah blah," means that, you know, you can focus on actually doing the work in the time you're at work, and then still being able to enjoy the other stuff that you've got scheduled. And I think that keeps a lid on everything mental health wise for me. Rodney, I think you had a point to make.
Yeah, but before I get to that, I relate in terms of like the waking up thing you mentioned. When I started my C, I would wake up at like 5 a.m. I'd go to the gym, do errands, and like all these things. And for a bit that was like fine, but then like at this point now, like I wake up 8. I can barely do earlier than 8. Like it is tiring, like it catches up to you. So I relate. Like 7 months in, I can't get up before 8 a.m. And I was just gonna say, in terms of like, I think someone mentioned like going to bed or like stopping work at a certain time. I think this is especially for people who do law degrees. There's a sort of like weird pressure to constantly be working all the time, where I think people sort of, this sounds bad, but take university way too seriously. University is not a job. In my opinion, I don't think, like from my experience at work, I don't think there's really a reason to be doing work at like 8 p.m., I think. Or for me, I'd get to the library early. I'd try and like I'd work a couple of hours and go to my classes and all that, but I'd generally like try and stop working after 5 p.m. maximum. And I think there's like, don't feel pressure to work for the sake of working when you're at university, because it's not a job. You're at university to sort of gain life experience and to an extent have a good time, but not too good of a time. So don't feel pressure to work for work's sake. And I struggled with this a bit at university, because I'd go to the library and there's this one person I'd always see there. Like the person would always be there before me, and they'd always be there like when I'm leaving, they're still there. I spoke to this person once and I was just like, "You've been here for like 12 hours. You must have like finished every single thing you need to do for the rest of the year." And the person's like, "I read 13 pages in 12 hours. Like just because people are in the library for a while, or you think people are doing a lot, does not mean they actually are. So I think don't put pressure on yourself while you're at university to sort of be constantly working and sort of do the whole FaceTime thing in the library, because there'll be plenty of working when you're actually working, especially if you are a trainee solicitor, which I think Anthony could probably attest to. So yeah, there's plenty of work in your future, so relax while you're at university.
Thank you, Rodney. Papa, I feel like
Yeah. I think, you know, regardless of what stage you're in at life, whether, you know, you're at a trainee level, or, you know, you're doing your LPC, or you're still studying, a constant thing that has been mentioned was being organized. Oftentimes, if you're not organized with how you spend your time or how you manage your time, whether you're a trainee or you're currently studying, oftentimes, you know, you can't be mentally clear about just about life in general. I feel. So, you know, making sure you're organized and consistent and disciplined as well is really important. But I think it was mentioned before, just that term, non-negotiables. I think, yeah, it's important to have non-negotiables. I think that's the term I was looking for, but didn't really know what it was. In the sense that, you know, what are the things in life that you must do? The things that, you know, if you don't do, then you know things aren't going to go well today. And, you know, just make sure to stick to them. You know, for me, it's non-negotiable. I need 8 hours of sleep, non-negotiable. I won't leave the house without praying, non-negotiable. You know, what are your non-negotiables and how can you make sure that you stick to them? And, you know, what are the things that you can observe in your life that if you don't do, things tend not to go as well? And then just lastly as well, just a caution, a reminder that, you know, you're applying to all these firms now, but it's no good, you know, getting accepted for a TC and then you finish with a 2-2 on your degree. You know, like you still have a degree to do. You're there for a reason. And in a way, yes, it is a means to an end. But that is, or at least for me, whilst I was at St Andrews, that was my number one priority. And I always had the mindset, the mentality that, you know, if I'm on top of my degree at the moment, then hopefully everything else will fall into place. Oftentimes I realized that if things weren't going well with my degree, then I tended to be stressed about just about everything else. So yeah, just remember the fact that, you know, it's all well and good getting a TC, but if you don't have the grades, sorry mate, you're not going anywhere. So yeah, just be realistic with your expectations and yeah, have your non-negotiables as well.
Thank you so much, Papa. I really love that discussion because it kind of shows that we all kind of experience the same things. Like, I know a lot of us are still studying right now, but it's quite nice to hear you guys who are more accomplished and where you are right now, kind of offering your advice and sharing your experiences. So we're going to move on to our last panel question. I think Debbie's going to be asking that. Sorry.
We are running out of time, but as it's a diversity and inclusion panel, it's only right that we ask what diversity and inclusion means to you, which is something that I think about constantly. And so just off of the back of that, as like a double-handed question, how do you think firms could further promote diversity and inclusion? So feel free to answer.
I don't mind starting. It's very firm dependent. I feel commercial law as a field or as a space has made a lot of improvement in a very short space of time. You know, funny enough, I'm very good friends with actually with a partner at Macfarlane's, Jack Baines. Very nice guy, and you know, I was chatting with him about this, and I think firms are at different stages in terms of, you know, people from backgrounds like ourselves being at the top of the firm or being right across, being represented across the firm. Other firms like Clifford Chance or Freshfields have done really well at that for a long time. It's very firm dependent. You have to sit down and look at, you know, do these firms embody the values that I'm interested in? Do these firms do enough, or am I convinced that they do enough? Or will I feel supported from my background were I to be working at this firm? And, you know, in a way you can't really gain or glean that unless you've had the chance to really visit or engage with people from the firm. I definitely got that with CC. I definitely got that with Macfarlane's actually as well. That was one of the firms I did apply to. So yeah, there are things to look out for. I think for me as someone, so I mentioned that I have two disabilities. I have dyspraxia, and I also have Erlen syndrome. Basically, the way it affects me, stuff like handwriting or memory, stuff along those lines. You know, be open and, you know, upfront about, you know, what are firms doing to support the things that you care about. You know, and I was very much convinced that Clifford Chance were ahead of the game when it came to diversity and inclusion. I feel it's become quite a buzzword, but a lot of people don't really know what that embodies or means. And actually, it's really dependent on the individual. What are the things that you prioritize? Do you prioritize feeling included in a space where you're a black man? Do you prioritize feeling included in a space where, you know, you have a certain disability? And you're going to glean that depending on which firm you know, you happen to visit. So yeah, do your research. I will caution against the idea of walking into a firm and saying that I was very impressed by their diversity and inclusion. It's kind of not the way to go about it. But again, it's a very important factor to be considering. when you visit firms for sure. So just observe, speak to people from other firms, speak to us at CC or McFarland's or wherever, and try and get an impression. I've been to other firms, which I won't mention, that I looked at and I'm just like, no, sorry, it's just not for me, because I either felt I won't be included there, or it wasn't, diversity is a high priority for me. It just wasn't there. But yeah, just think about your priorities and which firms are able to align with that.
I think just going at the back of what Papa was saying, one thing that I would just say is don't take a firm at face value. So when I was applying for firms, McFarland's, a lot of people might know this, but they don't, to be fair, have the best rep. And to be quite frank, their stats also aren't very great. So if you just look at their stats and just on the outside, you probably won't think that it's a firm that values diversity or really, if anything, is doing much about it, because in comparison to other city law firms that are quite ahead, it might be quite concerning. And to be quite frank, that was a massive consideration of mine and something that I very much valued when I was applying for law firms. But that's why I think it's so important to, one, actually go and meet people in person, attend open days, try and do as many VAC schemes as you can, or try and do VAC schemes for the firm that you really want to go to, and generally speak to people and look at who's actually there, and don't also displace other partners, because at the end of the day, you've got to just think partners probably made partner at, having been at the firm for quite a few years, but who are they now recruiting from the bottom up, and what are they doing in terms of their actual policies now, and what have they got in place in terms of their recruitment cycle. So that's one thing I did quite a lot of research into and made a priority to find out when I was attending Max, for instance. So I spoke to GradRec, I spoke to the Reach Network, spoke to Jack, who's one of our key brain partners, and I generally asked them what is it that they're doing and what policies have they got in place. And I saw quite a lot of potential there, and also a genuine commitment from the firm to improve. So they acknowledge that, number one, they aren't great, which is good, and secondly, the fact that they are taking active steps to improve that. And even the way that I came into Max was through aspiring solicitors, and aspiring solicitors within themselves are an organisation that are committed to increasing diversity. So the fact that I knew that Max was associated with them said a lot to me. Something else, which is a bit of a airy-fairy quote, but someone said to me, and it stuck with me, that diversity is about being invited to a party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And you might hear that quote sometimes, but I generally believe that's quite true. So you might have quite a lot of diverse people at your firm, but it's about what is the firm also doing to actually make them people feel included. So for instance, now that since joining Max, I've been quite active in our committees and ensuring that we do stuff around different races, different religions, and actually raising awareness about different people that are there and the different diverse candidates that are present in the firm. And just by doing that, you're increasing inclusivity, because they feel like they are way more part of the firm, not just the diverse space. And I think it's number one, doing those sorts of things, but also what Arthur just said, just to finish off on, is once you get to the firm that you're in, actually really trying to promote diversity within yourself and kind of being that champion and that cheerleader, because you're now there, but what you want to do is kind of help others up and, put your hand down the rail again and help people up and make sure that, yeah, you're not like the only one there, but also that you want to give back again, because at the end of the day, you are a diverse candidate, and I'm guessing a load of people will be looking up at you and kind of hoping to be in the position you are one day, but also just to make known that it's not impossible to be there. Just because you might look different or you might feel out of place, you are just as good as anyone else, and you are just as determined to be there. So those are just a few points that I'd like to flag.
To sort of take this to a different angle, I would say it is important to consider diversity and inclusion. But one thing I think some of the best advice that I ever got is don't self-select. Just because you look at an organization and you think it's not very diverse, I shouldn't apply there because there aren't people that look like me. I think you're basically sort of limiting yourself. And when I started applying, I found it quite disheartening, because I went to a lot of firms where it was very clear that I was the only Black man in the building who was interested in or like or if I had gotten a job there, I would have been the only black man who was a lawyer there, not like a security guard or something like that. And I found that quite disheartening, and I thought this isn't the sort of profession for me. But I met someone who's more senior than me, who was a black man in law, and the sort of advice he gave me was, don't sort of limit yourself, because if you do that, then if everyone does that, then there'll just never be black men in law or like whatever other type of person. There always has to be sort of a first person to do it, who sort of sets the way for other people to sort of come after. So it can be quite disheartening if you look at an organization and you think they don't have people who look like me, or they don't have a background similar to me. But I don't think that's enough to sort of say I'm not going to apply, because you can apply, go to that organization and change things, or be a role model for people after you, where at the next open day after you've gotten the job, you're then the person there to say there are other people who look like you. So I think it's sort of a balancing act where on one hand you can value diversity and inclusion, but on the other hand, you don't want to sort of let that deter you from doing things that you're keen on doing, or things that you might think, oh, people like me don't do this. But it is quite challenging, and I definitely did struggle when I went to certain firms and I looked around like an open day and I was the only black person there. And it's like, oh, this is interesting. So I think it's sort of about having self-confidence, because all of you have gone to really good universities. I'm sure you had great A-level grades. You've already accomplished a lot getting to the point you've gone to. When it comes to careers, then you just have to be self-confident in yourself, and don't let your whatever characteristic you think is a hindrance, don't let it be a hindrance in your own mind. That's my rant.
No, I 100% agree. I think a part of inclusion is putting your hand down the ladder, definitely. Papa, you were going to add something?
I think it's actually best if Amara and Kanika, obviously you make your points because I've already spoken, and you can come back to me afterwards.
No problem.
For me personally, I have a very different view, because I don't know how to phrase this. I don't want to be the only black face in a room, just because I don't want to. I'm sorry. I've been in spaces where I'm the only black person, or the first black person to have done something, and the hell I went through. That now other people are there, but the hell I went through, I wouldn't wish it on myself again. So I think it's very much your personality, and very much, if you can do it, do it. It's an amazing thing. You're paving the way. But I personally, I can't do it, and it's just because it will be hard. I walked into a firm where I was the only black person in the room, and the firm literally said, so as you guys can tell, we're very committed to like diversity and inclusion, and pointed at me. They literally pointed at me, and I thought, oh my god, I'm imagining this, and I looked around, I was like, people are leaning their eyes towards me, this person is gesturing towards me. I'm the only black person and person of color in this room. I want to leave because I feel really uncomfortable. So I think it's definitely, don't limit yourself 100%. Don't do things because you will be the only one in the room, but also think about your mental health. Think about what's the most comfortable thing for what is safe for you. I'm just speaking as a black woman. What is safe for me? Because I don't want to put my body at harm's length. I don't want to be at a job and also constantly face microaggressions and constantly face a lot of, I just can't do it. But that's just me for my mental health. So for me, when I look at diversity and inclusion, I'm looking at firms, and I looked at firms, this is literally what I did, who have already started, and I'm like, what are you actively doing? I don't want to be a tick box sort of person. I don't want to be part of your statistics. What are you actively doing for my community? And so that's why I chose Clifford Chance and a few other firms, because not only do they have like a high intake of black trainees, but they're also the lot of their pro bono work is second to none. It's amazing. I had opportunity, and the amount of, like, for example, there's this amazing organization that lives, charity that's like quite close to me, which is the London Black Women's Project, which is catering towards like Black women and supporting Black women for domestic abuse. And like Clifford Chance gave a massive amount to the organization to support their work. I'm working for a charity currently, which is Tender, which is a great domestic abuse and sexual assault charity. And Clifford Chance actively funds them, supports their work, provides them with trainees as well, but also receives training from them. So it's like I'm looking at firms that are actively doing the work and are actively doing things now so that I can walk in and help the system ensure that we're creating a safe space. I personally cannot be the first, but that's only because I've done it before and it was hell, and so I'm scared. So if other people do have the abilities and do have the confidence to do it, then definitely do it. But for me, I cannot. If I'm a firm where I'm the first person, I'm going to run because I'm just scarred. But it's just down to personal preferences.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of somewhere in between what Rodney and Amara were saying. I think EDI is a really, really personal thing. I think controversial maybe, but it's become too much of a buzzword, and we're kind of forced to think about how it makes us feel. So you're kind of confronted with this idea, I don't know, this like thing that maybe wasn't that important to you because, you know, for whatever reason, everyone feels differently about their protected characteristics. So I think that you should think about how it makes you feel. Like for Amara, she doesn't want to be, you know, the only Black person in a room, and that is completely valid. You know, for you might not actually care what the makeup of a firm is, and that's equally as valid. You know, no one's going to judge you for it. I think for me, CC are like, wow, like they're ahead of the game. And I work at the firm right now in a different function, and my manager is one of the diversity and inclusion team leaders. And for me, what was important between CC and my other offer was that CC were doing the work and they were making it a place for our generation to be the change. Exactly what Gurpreet was saying, like, I don't look at partners and think, oh, they're not diverse, because partners have been in the firm for 20, 30 years. And 20, 30 years ago, the only lawyers were white men. So you can't look at a partnership and be like, they're so undiverse, because that's the makeup of the firm. Like, that's what it looked like. It's important to see what they're doing at this moment to encourage people like us, like Gurpreet and Amara and Rodney, everyone's been saying, who are coming from the bottom up to make us feel like we can be part of the culture of the firm. So I think it wasn't important to me to look at stats. I never have and never will look at stats. You know, it doesn't matter to me how many specifically South Asian women work at a firm or how many women of color or people of color, because a reality is that doesn't mean anything. Those people could still feel tokenized. Those people could still feel like, you know, no one's listening to them, or they're the only person in like their seat, the only, you know, person of color in corporate or whatever. What was important to me is that the firm is doing the work to make our generation, you know, Gen Z are hailed as a generation of change for a reason. We won't take shit and we won't take it lying down. And so it was important to me to be part of a firm who respects that and who are doing the work to make us feel like we can actually be a part of the change and not just tokens. Because I think my worst nightmare, and I have experienced at one of my other firms, is I felt like I was a tick box exercise, and it made me doubt myself so much. That triggered an imposter syndrome in me that I didn't actually have beforehand. Like, I am very self-confident in my abilities, but sometimes like an EDI problem is that when you're made to feel like the only person of color in a room, and you're made to feel like you're there, like how Amara's horrific experience was, it can make you second guess yourself so much. So I think that EDI is not the be all and end all. I don't think that is the most important thing when you look at a firm. It's part of what builds a firm culture. It's part of what you feel when you actually go and visit a firm. It's not something that a firm should ever project onto you. If you're going to, I think the worst thing that I've ever attended are EDI talks at law firms, because it makes me feel so like, ew, just like, ew, you're sitting here telling us like, we are good for you, we are good for you. It's like, this is just really gross. Like it's how you feel when you talk to other people in the firm. It's how they make you feel when they just have a conversation with you normally. That's what like inclusion is, and that's important. Like how people make you feel when you say hello to them, when you pass them in the corridor. Do they even smile at you? Things like that were important to me. Stats were never important to me. But yeah, conversations, the vibe, and policies to make me feel like I can be who I want to be and I can continue my activism and not feel bad for it, and not feel like also that my activism is going to be like a thing for the firm to show off to the world. And like, look at us, we're doing this. So I would say ultimately be wary when firms project EDI onto you, because that's very superficial. You will learn so much more by having an in-person conversation or over Zoom, whatever you can do with some people from the firm, because some firms, you really learn a lot in literally a 2-minute conversation as to how they're going to make you feel if you start working there. But yeah, I think it's very personal.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Thank you for adding that. I quickly want to add, if anyone has any questions to ask for the Q&A, feel free to start raising your hands from now. But yeah, Papa, if you'd like to add.
Yeah, just everyone watching, really, to be honest, that I think what everyone's answers have shown is that it really comes down to your personal preferences and what you prioritize. Even like, for example, here in Amara's story, I know that I'm probably on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. And, sort of 2 personal stories, one not relating to commercial law per se, but, when I joined St Andrews, 0.7% of the student population was Black. Basically, you go into town, the only Black person you see is yourself. Personally, for me, that wasn't a problem. I saw that more as an opportunity. Whereas for someone else, that might not be the case. And then the second one, actually, funny enough, relating to McFarlane's and the partner, Jack Baines. When he told me he was the only Bain partner at the firm, I thought, oh my goodness, this is blah, blah, blah. But actually, I had the chance to visit the firm, had the chance to, speak with a lot of other people in associate and trainee positions as well. And sometimes actually, I think the priority for me was not necessarily who's the face of the firm or what's the makeup of the firm, but what potential does this firm have to improve, or what potential does this firm have going forward? So don't just walk into a firm and say, there's no one who looks like me. Again, personal preference, I can't command you. For me personally, I won't walk into a firm and say, there's no one that looks at me, I'm not going here. McFarlane's don't have a lot of Bain partners. What I saw at the firm blew me away. So for me, it really comes down to potential. If I walk into a space and I see there are people who aren't from my background, whether that be where I went to school, my racial background, my disabilities or whatever, I see more of that as an opportunity for me to open a space for other people to come, as opposed to somewhere, oh yeah, I'm not going there. No one looks at me, I'm not going there. And it goes back to, so I've forgotten your name, what one of the panelists had said earlier about, not limiting yourself. Who knows, like that one place that you say I'm not going to because no one looks at me could be the one place where, you really enjoy working there more than you would anywhere else. So know your priorities, know your personal preferences, and try and find a firm that's aligned with that. I think that's another thing as well, is that when you're applying to law firms, it's not just about, you demonstrating to the firm that you're capable of working there, but also you being able to evaluate whether or not this firm's for you. If your priorities are you want to see someone who looks like you at a firm, that may limit where you want to go to. If you're someone like myself who doesn't really have that as a priority, again, that may open or close up certain other doors as well. So just know where you stand on things, and find a firm that aligns your priorities.
Anthony, would you like to? Oh, should I? I'll just ask if Anthony would like to add anything, and then you can start with the Q&A.
Yeah, just a couple final points on D&I. I think it's important to acknowledge the legal field kind of as a whole, and also not just the legal sector, but other corporate sectors. They do have a problem with like ensuring diversity and inclusion in the firms. And I think the methods of tackling that are both bottom up and from the top down. It's easy to kind of be swayed by what kind of programs and initiatives different firms are running. I think there are a lot of great initiatives out there, and a lot of firms doing really good work. I think Amara's mentioned stuff that Clifford Chance is doing. I personally, when I was applying, I wasn't too. I don't think you can never really be too sure about how it's going to end up when you get there. But since I've been a while, I've been really pleasantly surprised by the amount of opportunities, not just pro bono, but also for widening entry into law that I've found. And because it's Black History Month this month, and I literally joined a couple of months ago, I feel like I'm doing so much in that sphere already. But I mean, on Kanika's point on kind of partnership, and yeah, you find in a lot of law firms, the partnership is fairly set and a specific subset of person. And it can make things quite difficult to change, I think. Although you have the kind of great kind of initiatives coming from the bottom end of stuff, I think real change at law firm where the power structure lies in the partnership. And if you have this kind of subsisting old boys network, basically, in like some of the big law firms, which I think makes change quite difficult to come by. Real change, at least anyway, because inclusion, I think, is the far more important aspect of D&I, because if you recruit really diverse trainees, but I think it's quite easy to see that you kind of slowly filter out and lose that as you go up the ladder. And although you can kind of accept that, okay, the partnership is what it is, you can't really do anything about it. I mean, I find myself kind of being drawn to WOW and some other US firms because the partnership's slightly younger, I think slightly more dynamic and more receptive to change. In the time I've been here, I've had some really good conversations with, we have a partner mentor. My partner mentor is basically head of the LGBTQ plus inclusion committee in the firm. And we have monthly catch-ups, and that kind of comes up a lot. And it's interesting to see how important it is, and also how openly you feel able to talk about those things. That's quite important in the workplace as well. And then also talks with like the lead of professional development in the firm, and you just kind of really get a sense of that it is really valued. And I think that's something that is going to be difficult to change in the legal field. That kind of attitude from the partnership or the CEOs or the people in who basically have the power in the firms. But yeah, it's a difficult one, I say. But we'll see how it goes.
Thank you all so much for answering our questions. If anyone would like to drop off, please feel free. But we're going to start with our Q&A. So please forgive me and correct me if I pronounce your name wrong. But Amrita.
Yeah, that's how you pronounce my name. And I want to thank you to all the panelists. Your stories have been very interesting. And I just wanted to go back to something Paul was saying earlier about facing difficulties such as disabilities. And the question I have is, how are you able to speak up about difficult experiences such as disability, physical or mental health during interviews? And did you feel like it benefited you to do so?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rita. Yes. Yeah, that's the short answer. One of the big problems was not being able to acknowledge or realize the way in which my disabilities affected my performance at interview. So, for example, essentially, one of the big problems is with a case study interview, you're essentially asked to go over a certain amount of material in a short space of time and be able to talk about that or recall information. I'm rubbish at that. I can't do that, basically. In fact, when I got onto my Spark scheme, they give you feedback afterwards as how you did when you interview to get onto the scheme. And Clifford Chance have a certain sort of criteria, almost like a mark scheme, and they mark you out of 5 on each point. And the expectation at the time was that you read the case study, you come into the interview, and you do a presentation on the case study for 10 minutes. I couldn't do it. I scored 0. But I scored 5 on all the other sort of elements, so they saw that as a fluke. But actually, no, it wasn't a fluke. It was just that, you know, my disabilities mean such that I find it very hard to recall information quite quickly. So I think failing to disclose is oftentimes to your own detriment. At least it was in my case. And I actually noticed that had I done that, or had I understood the ways in which my disabilities affect me in an interview scenario, an interview context, I would have been a lot more open and honest about it and a lot more upfront. For example, when I had my TC interview with Clifford Chance, I spent 10 minutes explaining what my disabilities were and how they affected me to the partner and the senior associate before we started the interview. I demanded that graduate recruitment inform them that I have these disabilities beforehand. I said, look, you know, I have these disabilities. This is how it affects me. In the interview, it may end up being the case that more often than other candidates, I may ask you to repeat questions or rephrase questions. These are the reasons why. Or, for example, if you're asking me to refer to something in the case study or to ask me a question regarding the case study, obviously because of the disabilities I've mentioned, it may take me slightly longer than other candidates before I'm able to respond. And that did, just seeing them understand what my challenges were and seeing them understand or giving them context as to why I may behave slightly different to other candidates put me at ease. I think one of the biggest problems a lot of candidates have at interview is worrying about how they appear as opposed to worrying about the content of the answers that they give. And if you do that, you're going to trip up. You're not going to have the time to actually be or the ability to be able to actually focus on giving a very good answer. If you're focused on the fact that, oh, have I kept quiet for too long? What are they thinking of me? Am I sat right? Like, is my hair all right? Like, it's all these other factors. But once I disclosed and once I was open about it, yeah, everything just flows. And they understand. They really understand. So if it's, again, if it may not be disability, it may be of a certain experience that you've had. But it's thinking about how can I use that to my advantage in an interview context. It may be difficult, but I think you've got to know that you're not being judged. And I think actually also it's dependent on who's interviewing you as well. And I think it's important that, you know, interviews, and I've got this at Clifford Chance in all of my interview experiences, that they're open, you know, they create an environment in an interview that isn't hostile, that isn't an interrogation. And once they set that up, it actually becomes a lot easier for you. So it's not all in your hands, but just know that failure to disclose or failure to be upfront about some of the challenges you face can actually turn around and not have a good effect on you later on. So be confident, you know, be confident in regardless of what challenges you're facing, and be open and upfront about it. I remember on my Spark, sorry to go on for so long, but one of the feedback that I had from my Spark scheme for one of the seats that I sat in, one of the criticisms I got from my supervisor was Papa seems to be someone who's really enthusiastic, but I don't know how good he is at being able to actually take instructions, because he kept coming back to me and asking for certain things which indicated to me that he wasn't listening. But if I told you I had dyspraxia and that my short-term memory is rubbish, you know, maybe that actually could have had an effect as well, you know. So I think my experience really taught me that failing to disclose or failing to be upfront about your struggles oftentimes doesn't work out in your favor. And yeah, you can't rely on the firm or firms to encourage you to do so. You're going to have to do that yourself.
Rodney, would you like to go next, and then Amara?
I think what Papa said was great, but what I'd add to that is I think whether it's disability or like your background or things like your characteristics about you, I think you never want to work somewhere where you sort of have to hide a part of yourself or pretend to be something that you're not. And I think that was some of the best advice that I've ever gotten. Like, for example, I never want to work somewhere where I sort of have to change who I am to sort of fit in, or hide aspects of my personality or stuff like that. So I would say whether it's disability or just something about yourself, try and find somewhere where you can just walk in the door and just be your regular self, and you don't have to like try and change your accent or sort of change who you are, your hobbies or things like that. There's plenty of firms that are open and would sort of take you for who you are, and don't feel pressured to work somewhere or be somewhere where they want you to change into something that you're not.
Yeah, quickly, I just also wanted to add that if you find it challenging or you find that the firm doesn't actually take into consideration when you disclose a disability or you don't disclose something, that's a very big indicator that that firm is probably not the best place for you to work in. Because if at this certain stage where they're trying to impress you and they're trying to go all out and you're trying to find out about one another, that they're struggling to do something very simple for you, then you have to think about how will it be when you're working there for hours on end and you do need extra support, or you need them to cater to a certain disability, you need them to help you in certain ways. So it's a good indicator, because that's something that I did, but also a close friend of mine also did, and that's literally how she weighed up two firms who were neck and neck in her head, and she asked them quite frankly, this is my disability, how do you support me? And what one firm said was shockingly bad and terrible, and that's when they were trying to impress her, and it was so bad. And another firm just said, we will basically give you all of this, and we will happily take a recommendation on what more to do, and they've lived to that statement. So yeah.
Can I just add very quickly, you have to use the things that you struggle with to your advantage. Just two examples, practical examples. When I had my TC interview at Clifford Chance, I remember the partner asking me, tell me about a time where you've had to deal with multiple competing deadlines. And I spoke at great length for, some of the stuff I was doing in my final year, the leadership responsibilities, applying for firms, so on and so forth. Gave quite a strong and detailed answer. And I was able to almost add sort of the disclaimer, oh yeah, I did this in spite of the disabilities that I had. And I visibly saw how much I impressed the partners, because they, now understanding my disabilities and understanding what I struggle with, were more impressed at the fact that I was able to do what I was able to do in spite of the challenges that I had. Another example, I remember being asked in my interview, tell me about a time where you've had to deal with difficult people. I mentioned the experience that I had working at Argos, working in retail, dealing with rude customers or customers that might give you abuse. You may have, that may be an opportunity, I don't know, whether you've been through something or whatever for you. It could be, coming out to your parent or whatever it is. Tell me about the time you've had to deal with difficult people. How have you gone about handling that? And I think that's really where the things that you find most hard to talk about can actually be used to your advantage. Because at the end of the day, you want the job. Like at the end of the day, you want the TC. And actually, what oftentimes tends to happen is that if you're able to bring something else to the table that other candidates aren't, then you'll usually get the TC. And what usually you can bring to the table are your own experiences that other people don't have, your own stories that other people don't have. And so I feel like, yeah, you've got to use those opportunities and those experiences to your advantage.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to that question? Okay, Eshel, over to you.
Yeah, so we'll wrap it up now. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone who's attended, and thank you so much to our speakers. Like, today's been so amazing. Like, personally, I feel like I've learned so much and feel so validated. And I've already had several people messaging me saying just how insightful this panel was. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to be here for us. Yeah, that's it. So I hope everyone has a good evening, and thank you so much again.
Can I just say before we all go, if any of you had any questions that you didn't want to ask here, just feel free to drop me a message on the hated LinkedIn or whatever, and yeah, I'll definitely be happy to chat or on Teams or wherever.